I would like to walk through some scripture, and I believe it portrays what I would call compatibilism. That is simply the actions, the determinations, the plans, the will or wills of God and those of man. Those two are compatible. I'm not really that interested personally in the philosophical arguments and presentations of compatibilism or incompatibilism and all that stuff. I simply want to see it from the text, the scriptures. And if they do present some type of compatibilism, then I will hold to that. And I do believe there are texts that lay this out. And one I'm going to walk through tonight is going to be Genesis chapter, I think it's about chapter 35 is where it starts. I had this planned for last week, got tied up with things, couldn't do it. And so here we are. I do want to make a couple of comments real quick about something that was said in a live stream yesterday. It's let me see what I'm doing. Okay, here we go. Definitely can't do two things at once. What was said was now this is not to say whether or not Calvinism is true. I'm not that interested in defending a system that much anymore, to be honest. But I think this argument that is presented against Calvinism is a it's used a lot because you have popular anti-Calvinists that people like to follow. And ultimately what happens, it's happened to me in the past, is even if you don't mean to, you end up regurgitating some of the things that you listen to on a stream or two from your favorite apologist or your favorite anti-Calvinist or anti-whatever. And not realizing it, you repeat a argument or two that is quite silly. Okay, do give me a second. I am enjoying some hot tea, some chamomile and mint tea. I do need to do that again, but I used to grow, I still grow mint, and but I used to grow mint, chamomile, lemon verbena, and sage for my teas at night, but I just haven't done it. With everything, the fresh, the homegrown and the fresh is always tastier and always better. You can taste that difference there. So the argument that was presented last night, or one of the arguments that I heard against Calvinism was here in Jeremiah 19. And it's verse, what verse is it? It's a commonly used anti-Calvinist verse. Why am I not? Did not enter my mind. Isn't that Jeremiah 19? I'm pretty sure. Okay, here we go. Verse 5. So this is used to, and I believe it's used to point out that God did not decree it or something like that, which I'm not even sure I would say God decrees everything or determines everything. At the very least, there are some things that are determined. That's just biblical. All things, I'm not sure I would affirm that anymore. Okay, so verse 4, because the people have forsaken me. Notice, because they have forsaken me and have profaned this place by making offerings in it to the two other gods, whom neither they nor their fathers nor the kings of Judah have known, and because they have filled this place with the blood of innocents, and have built the high places of Baal to burn their sons in the fire as burnt offerings to Baal, which I did not command or decree, nor did it come into my mind. Therefore, behold, the days are coming, declares the Lord, when this place shall no more be called Topheth, or the valley of the son of Hinnom, but the valley of slaughter. And the argument focuses on, obviously, this part, which I did not command or decree, nor did it come into my mind. Now, I think the Reformed answer to this critique is a proper understanding of the text in its context of the book of Jeremiah. If you read from verse or from chapter 1 to chapter 19, it becomes, in my personal opinion, abundantly clear, if you are not being biased, that this is not saying that he did not make a decree in the past or in eternity past, or that it did not literally enter his mind as if he never knew or saw this coming. What it is saying is having to do about the law. There's no command or decree in that law that I gave you that told you to do this. And in fact, there were curses that would be placed upon you in that law if you were going to do this kind of thing. But I find it interesting that the critic of the Reformed faith will go to this verse and say, see, you don't even he didn't decree this, so therefore he didn't decree all things. Now, real quick, that kind of reasoning, the anti-Calvinists or the non-Calvinists will not accept when the Calvinists handle Scripture that way against them. So that's an inconsistency on that I've noticed. But go from chapter 1. Also think about when the book of Jeremiah was written. It was written during a time when the Jews were quite literally being thrown into captivity and having the curses placed upon them because they had been doing this. So how can we say, as if the non-Calvinist is going to use it, how can the non-Calvinist who does not affirm, even if you affirm open theism, still doesn't hold up, because how can we say that it did not enter God's mind when they were building the altars before they started sacrificing? It's almost like you want to denigrate the wisdom and knowledge and understanding of God to this point because you want to make to this like really low point because you want to make a valid argument against a system you don't like, rather than understanding that this text is actually not a good proof text against the Calvinist position. Okay, so think about this. If what's a good example? Okay, we'll just do this. If I see my son building something up in the tree, but he just has a couple pieces of wood up there, am I going to be like, I have absolutely no clue what you're doing, this did not enter my mind? Or did I, when I saw him getting the wood, assume he's going to build something, and then when I saw him put up in the tree, uh, I figured he's building a tree house? Okay, that's me learning as I see it. Imagine God, who had already seen it and knew that it was going to happen before it even happened. How nonsensical! It doesn't make any sense for you to use this verse to say that he didn't decree it because it did not enter his mind, as if he didn't, as if when they were building the altars to burn their children in the fire, he didn't know what they were doing. Wait a minute, you guys. House of Judah, House of Israel. What in the world are you building there? I told you not to build those. Wait. What? I don't even know what those are. What are those things? What are you building in this area? I never commanded you to build these type of things. What is that? It just doesn't make any sense. So chapter 11, I mean, if you just read from chapter 1 to 19, you'll see that very clear that 19:5 is uh, not saying what the critic of Calvinism is trying to make it say. But let's read chapter 11 real quick. The word that came to Jeremiah from the Lord. Hear the words of this covenant and speak to the men of Judah and the inhabitants of Jerusalem. You shall say to them, Thus says the Lord, the God of Israel, Cursed be the man who does not hear the words of this covenant, that I command your fathers when I brought them out of the land of Egypt from the iron furnace, saying, Listen to my voice and do all that I command you. So shall you be my people, and I will be your God, that I may confirm the oath that I swore to your fathers to give them a land flowing with milk and honey, as at this day. Then I answered, So be it, Lord. And the Lord said to me, Proclaim all these words in the cities of Judah and in the streets of Jerusalem. Hear the words of this covenant and do them. For I solemnly warned your fathers. John, grace and peace to you. If you wish to join, I post the link. If not, you can just listen. It's all good. And the Lord said to me, Proclaim all these words in the city of Judah and in the streets of Jerusalem. Hear the words of this covenant and do them. For I solemnly warned your fathers when I brought them out of the land of Egypt, warning them persistently even to this day, saying, Obey my voice. Yet they did not obey or incline their ear, but everyone walked in the stubbornness of his evil heart. Therefore, I brought upon them all the words of this covenant. Okay, that's curses right there, which I commanded them to do, but they did not. Again, the Lord said to me, A conspiracy exists among the men of Judah and the inhabitants of Jerusalem. They have turned back to the iniquities of their forefathers, who refused to hear my words. They have gone after other gods to serve them. So there we go. Okay, they're going after other gods to serve them. The house of Israel and the house of Judah have broken my covenant that I made with their fathers. Okay, they broke the covenant. What happens when you break the covenant? Curses are placed upon you if you don't repent and turn from them. Therefore, thus says the Lord, Behold, I am bringing disaster upon them that they cannot escape. Though they cry to me, I will not listen to them. Then the cities of Judah and the inhabitants of Jerusalem will go and cry to the gods. Notice here, they will cry to the gods to whom they make offerings, but they cannot save them in the time of their trouble. For your gods have become as many as your cities, O Judah, and as many as the streets of Jerusalem, as the altars you have set up to shame. Altars to make offerings to Baal. Therefore, do not pray for this people, or lift up a cry or prayer on their behalf, for I will not listen when they call to me in the time of trouble. What right has my beloved in my house, when she has done many vile deeds? Can even sacrificial flesh avert your doom? Can you then exult? The Lord once called you a green olive tree, beautiful with good fruit, but with the roar of a great tempest he will set fire to it, and his branches will be consumed. The Lord of hosts who planted you has decreed disaster against you because of the evil that the house of Israel and the house of Judah have done, provoking me to anger by making offerings to Baal. Okay, so they're in this process. They're making offerings to Baal, right? They're building these altars, and going back to chapter 19, verse 5, it did not come into my mind. That is not a literal statement. Okay. When they were building the altars, what do you think God was thinking when they when they were in the process of building those altars? Was he thinking, well, that's awesome. They're building more altars so they can do more sacrifices for me? Or do you think that he already knew what they were going to do? I mean, which one makes more sense? But in the context of chapters 1 through 19, we see that it is breaking of the covenant and the curses are placed on it. In other words, this not commanding, not decreeing, not coming to my mind refers to not being commanded in the law that was given to them. And in fact, not only was it not commanded, it was, if you do these curses will be placed upon you. That's the context of all of this. So the critic of Calvinism, who used this verse as if it's a zinger against them, is, uh, I think, uh, whether willingly, purposefully, or ignorantly, repeating a ridiculous argument, probably heard by an apologist against Calvinism that they like to listen to. And I get it. I've done in the past. I've repeated stuff that I heard without actually thinking about it and contemplating it and looking into it more. But I hope I don't hear this verse being used against Calvinism anymore. It's a very uh, absurd argument, to say the least. Even if you're an open theist, but especially if you're not. Grace and peace to you, Vekel. I'm glad to see you here. I'm about to go to get some sleep, but praise and reviewing our show. And Vekels, I have never seen so much misrepresentation, but in the short amount of time. It's one of the. I don't go over there often. I rarely ever do, actually, and I'm only there for a short period of time. I don't really, to be honest, enjoy that kind of environment. I enjoyed Vekel's stream last night. It was very enjoyable. But from what I've seen in there, it's not beneficial. I'll put it that way. I'll be nice. But I want to go through Genesis chapter. Start at chapter 35 because I'm not super interested in the philosophical position of compatibilism. What I care about is, does the scriptures in some way show a compatibilistic nature between God's will, decree, plans, foreknowledge, so on and so forth, and with man's? And if that is the case, then I don't see why it is such a big deal to hold to what I would call biblical compatibilism. I understand some people like philosophy and do very well with it. I don't, so I don't delve into it. I'll leave that to the people who do. But I mean, at the very least, biblically speaking, um, what we're going to see, I think personally, is that you in fact do see that God decreed these events to happen, and yet uh, not in such a way to where these individuals' wills were so controlled that they just did what they were commanded. Instead, they functioned within their environment and responded how they would have responded. Uh, I mean, it was according to their nature. I mean, I think it's, and we'll see. I would even say that God restrained, which again is that would be an active uh, power of God against their wills, because they wanted to murder Joseph, and they would have murdered Joseph if he had not restrained their wills. But how we saw that play out was through what? It was through the means of Reuben. I believe it was Reuben who said, uh, "It is not good, it is not wise to have this man's blood on our hands." But if God had not restrained their evil, and this is their brother that they're wanting to murder. I mean, I guess it's one thing. I don't have any desire to murder in any way, shape, or form. Uh, I would kill somebody if they tried to attack and kill my family or those around me. I'm a protector. I'll protect people around me. I'll protect people in my neighborhood, and if I'm in a store, I'll protect them as well to the best of my abilities. But I'm not a murderer in any way, shape, or form. I have zero desire for it. Uh, but I can only imagine your own brother, your own flesh and blood. You are so jealous and so prideful. You despise him so much that the more he speaks about dreams and getting the coat of many colors, your evil is just overwhelming. It swells up and it increases in power level more and more that you hear about these dreams, and him getting these the stuff and being loved by Jacob to the point to where you want to slay the man. So we'll see that as we walk through this, and we will also see that this was according to God's plan the whole time. If man can plan ahead of time, so can God, and yet God will do it perfectly. We will not. That is always going to be the difference whenever we talk about this kind of stuff. God does things perfectly, and even if we can't fully comprehend it, we can't fully explain every single question or assumed contradiction. Does not mean that there is one. At the end of the day, let God be true and every man a liar. All right, so I believe it's chapter 35. I want to start. Let's see. I'm going to skip through some. It's pretty long. It goes to like the end of the book. God said to Jacob, "Arise, go up to Bethel and dwell there. Make an altar there to the God who appeared to you when you fled from your brother Esau." So Jacob said to his household, actually, is this where I want to? Let me look for a second. Esau's descent. No, Joseph's dream. Let's see here. Yeah, I think it's 37 actually. Grace and peace to you, Ryan. Acadiana Presbyterian. You're welcome to join if you want. The link is there. And I'll say real quick, I do believe this event, the event in the book of Jonah, the event spoken of in Acts 2 and Acts 4 about the cross, these are all proofs of what I would call biblical compatibilism. But tonight I'm just going to go through this one. Yeah, man, no worries. Go ahead and do your studies and pray. Definitely important. If I seen a little bit, I see you, man. All good. All right. Jacob lived in the land of his father, sojourning in the land of Canaan. These are the generations of Jacob. Joseph, being 17 years old, was pasturing the flock with his brothers. He was a boy, so he's only 17 years old. He was a boy with the sons of Bilhah and Zilpah, his father's wives, and Joseph brought a bad report of them to their father. Now Israel loved Joseph more than any other of his sons, because he was the son of his old age, and he made him a robe of many colors. So there's the first thing that pisses off his brothers, is that he is loved more than his other sons, and because of that he gets this robe of many colors. But when his brothers saw that their father loved him more than all his brothers, they hated him and could not speak peacefully to him. So there's that depravity, that sin in these brothers. Now Joseph had a dream, and when he had told it to his brothers, they hated him even more. So there's see what I was talking about. There's more building up of this depravity and this hatred towards uh, Joseph. He said to them, "Hear this dream that I have dreamed. Behold, we were binding sheaves in the field, and behold, my sheaf arose and stood upright, and behold, your sheaves gathered around it and bowed down to my sheaf." His brothers said to him, "Are you indeed to reign over us, or are you indeed to rule over us?" So they hated him even more for his dreams and for his words. Then he dreamed another dream and told it to his brothers and said, "Behold, I have dreamed another dream. Behold, the sun, the moon, and 11 stars were bowing down to me." But when he told it to his father and to his brothers, his father rebuked him and said to him, "What is this dream that you have dreamed? Shall I and your mother and your brothers indeed come to bow ourselves to the ground before you?" And his brothers were jealous of him, but his father kept the saying in mind. Sounds like his father was wiser than his brothers. me check something real quick. I guess not. Okay. I thought there was more that I wanted to read before this, but never mind. All right. Now his brothers their father's flock, went to pasture their father's flock near Shechem. And Israel said to Joseph, "And are not your brothers pasturing the flock of Shechem? Come, I will send you to them." And he said to him, "Here I am." So he said to him, "Go now, see if it is well with your brothers and with the flock, and bring me word." So he sent him from the valley of Hebron, and he came to Shechem. And a man found him wandering in the fields, and the man asked him, What are you seeking?" "I am seeking my brothers," he said. "Tell me, please, where they are pasturing the flock." And the man said, "They have gone away, for I heard them say, 'Let us go to Dothan.'" So Joseph went after his brothers and found them at Dothan. They saw him from afar, and before he came near to them, they conspired against him to kill him. Okay, so they're planning to murder him. This is their will. This is their desire. This is what they're going to do, is to kill him, because their hatred has uh, clouded every single ounce of judgment that they have. Every single ounce of grace is just uh, depravity has swallowed up, and they want to murder their brother. They said to one another, "Here comes this dreamer. Come now, let us kill him and throw him into one of the pits. Then we will say that a fierce animal has devoured him, and we will see what will become of his dreams." But when Reuben heard it, he rescued him out of their hands, saying, "Let us not take his life." And Reuben said to them, "Shed no blood. Throw him into this pit here in the wilderness. Throw him into the pit in this wilderness, but do not lay a hand on him, that he might rescue him out of their hand to restore him to his father." So what's happened next? Reuben, I would say by God's grace, is suppressing the depravity and the will of Joseph's brothers through the means of Reuben. 'Cause remember earlier, all of the brothers, including Reuben, wanted to do this. But then apparently there's a change of mind in Reuben, and he says, "Let's not take his life. Instead, let's not shed any blood. Let's throw him into this pit here in the wilderness, but do not lay a hand on him, that he might rescue him out of their hand to restore him to his father." So when Joseph came to his brothers, they stripped him of his robe, the robe of many colors to wear that he wore. And they took him and threw him into a pit. The pit was empty, there was no water in it. Then they sat down to eat, and looking up, they saw a caravan of Ishmaelites coming from Gilead with their camels bearing gum, balm, and myrrh, on their way to carry it down to Egypt. Then Judah said to his brothers, "What profit is it if we kill our brother and conceal his blood? Come, let us sell him to the Ishmaelites, and let not our hand be upon him, for he is our brother, our own flesh." And his brothers listened to him. So here's the grace of God working through the means of Reuben. And now they have settled down a little bit. They don't want to murder him anymore. They're saying it makes more sense now. We see that this caravan, which again I would not say is by chance, it's coming through. And we'll see that all of this is part of God's plan, a plan that He had, although it doesn't say it in this text, a plan that He had, and He did not, and He devised, He thought of before the world was, not in the moment or minutes before the moment, or hours or weeks before the moment. And yet, what are we seeing? We're seeing on full display humans functioning in the real world with their own wills, their own desires, and we're actually seeing pretty depraved individuals here, willing and desiring what they want to will and desire. Come, let us sell him to the Ishmaelites, and let not our hand be upon him, for he is our brother, our own flesh, and his brothers listen to him. Then Midianite traders passed by, and they drew Joseph up and lifted him out of the pit, and sold him to the Ishmaelites for 20 shekels of silver. They took Joseph to Egypt. When Reuben returned to the pit and saw that Joseph was not in the pit, he tore his clothes and returned to his brothers, and said, the boy is gone, and where shall I go?" So, something to keep in mind as well too, while reading through all of this. These dreams, okay, where are they? Oh, there we go. Oh no, never mind. Okay, these dreams. I had a dream about the sheaves in the field. Okay, about the sun, moon, and stars. Okay. These were dreams that were not just random dreams that you happen to dream, but they were given to him by God. So, in other words, what these dreams were teaching and what they were saying is something that was going to happen. And so, all these events leading up to the fulfillment of these dreams is God's plan, and yet it is also the functioning of free will human beings making their own decisions and willing their own things and desiring their own things. And yet, this plan will actually happen completely, perfectly, fully, exactly how God planned it ahead of time. That is what I mean when I say biblical compatibilism. Where was I? Oh, yeah, here we go. So Reuben tore his clothes and returned to his brothers and said, "The boy is gone, and where shall I go?" Then they took Joseph's robe and slaughtered a goat and dipped the robe in the blood. And they sent the robe of many colors and brought it to their father and said, "This we have found. Please identify whether it is your son's robe or not." And he identified it and said, "It is my son's robe. A fierce animal has devoured him. Joseph is without doubt torn to pieces." Then Jacob tore his garments and put sackcloth on his loins and mourned for his son many days. All his sons and all his daughters rose up to comfort him, but he refused to be comforted and said, "No, I shall go down to Sheol to my son, mourning." Thus his father wept for him. So it seems that his father thinking and assuming that his son is dead is part of God's plan as well too. And so all this time he's going to be in grief, mourning. He wants to go. It's so painful for him that he wants to die and be with his son. So it's a very deep loss to him. And yet this is part of God's plan right here. This uh, seemingly bad thing. Meanwhile, the Midianites has sold him in Egypt to Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh, the captain of the guard. It happened at the time that Judah went down from his brothers and turned aside to a certain Adulamite whose name was Hirah. I don't know. I'm not going to read this right here. This is a story we don't need to read about. Talks about Judah, and Judah impregnates his own daughter-in-law, I believe, or something like that. Some craziness, some depraved stuff, I may say. And so this story, Joseph and Potiphar's wife. Okay, I'll just read through it. Now, keep in mind, though, this is part of God's plan as well, too. That the wicked behavior of this woman, which leads to the imprisonment of Joseph, is a part of God's plan, God's perfect plan, to make him basically the most powerful man in Egypt underneath Pharaoh. Now, I'm sure many people can think of better ways to do it, or they think they can, but apparently this is the most perfect, the best way to go about doing that and accomplishing that. I mean, we are humans. We gotta develop and we gotta learn through our mistakes and our failings, through struggles in life, through situations. We develop and we become stronger and we learn. Now Joseph had been brought down to Egypt, and Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh, the captain of the guard, an Egyptian, had brought him from the Ishmaelites who had bought him from the Ishmaelites who had brought him down there. The Lord was with Joseph, and he became a successful man, and he was in the house of his Egyptian master. Okay, so Joseph has become successful, but he is still under this Egyptian master, so he's not where he needs to be yet. And it looks like if he stayed here, he probably would have never been in a position to where he was because of Potiphar's wife. Due to her wicked and evil desires, the Lord used that to bless Joseph. But if that had never happened, and if Potiphar's wife had never been evil and wicked like that, he probably would have stayed under this master and never would, and those dreams never would have actually came true. His master saw that the Lord was with him, and that the Lord caused all that he did to succeed in his hands. So Joseph found favor in his sight and attended him, and he made him overseer of his house and put him in charge of all that he had. From the time that he made him overseer in his house and over all that he had, the Lord blessed the Egyptian's house for Joseph's sake. The blessing of the Lord was on all that he had in his house and field. So he left all that he had in Joseph's charge, and because of him, he had no concern about anything but the food he ate. Now, Joseph was handsome in form and appearance. And after a time, his master's wife cast her eyes on Joseph and said, "Lie with me." But he refused and said to his master's wife, "Behold, because of me, my master has no concern about anything in the house, and he has put everything that he has in my charge. He is not greater in this house than I am, nor has he kept back anything from me except you, because you are his wife. How then can I do this great wickedness and sin against God?" And as she spoke to Joseph, as she spoke to Joseph day after day, he would not listen to her, to lie beside her or to be with her. Think of that mindset real quick. How then can I do this great wickedness and sin against God? I wish more Christians nowadays had that mindset right there. But one day, when he went into the house to do his work, and none of the men of the house was in there, she caught him by his garment, saying, "Lie with me." But he left his garment in her hand and fled and got out of the house. And as soon as she saw that he had left his garment in her hand and had fled out of the house, she called to the men of her household and said to them, "See, he has brought among us a Hebrew to laugh at us. He came in to me to lie with me, and I cried out with a loud voice." And just notice the same pattern with like with his brothers. More evil, more depravity built upon more and more. Right here, same thing. She wants to lie with Joseph, and then not only does she not get that, but now because she doesn't get that, she starts lying about him to get him in trouble. Then she laid up his garment by her until his master came home. And she told him the story, saying, "The Hebrew servant whom you have brought up among us came in to me to laugh at me. But as soon as I lifted up my voice and cried, he left his garment beside me and fled out the house. As soon as his master heard word that his wife spoke to him, 'This is the way your servant treated me,' his anger was kindled. And Joseph's master took him and put him in prison, the place where the king's prisoners were confined, and he was there in prison. But the Lord was with Joseph and showed him steadfast love and gave him favor in the sight of the keeper of the prison." So notice, this whole time, the Lord is with him, and it is the Lord's doing. Now, however you want to say this happened, but it seems like the Lord is intervening, not even intervening. He's intervening, and he gives Joseph favor in the sight of the keeper of the prison, favor that probably would not have been there if the Lord had not done that. Thus, uh, altering, interacting, changing his will, whatever word you want to use, doesn't matter to me. The fact is that uh, the Lord gave this favor of Joseph to the keeper of the prison, just like he did with the master previously, master Joseph previously. And the keeper of the prison put Joseph in charge of all the prisoners who were in the prison. Whatever was done there, he was the one who did it. The keeper of the prison paid no attention to anything that was in Joseph's charge because the Lord was with him. And whatever he did, the Lord made it succeed. Sometime after this, the cupbearer and the king of Egypt and his baker committed, or I read that wrong, excuse me. Sometime after this, the cupbearer of the king of Egypt and his baker committed an offense against the Lord, the king of Egypt. And the Pharaoh was angry with his two officers and put them in custody in the house of the captain of the guard, in prison where Joseph was confined. The captain of the guard appointed Joseph to be with them, and he attended them. They continued for some time in custody. One night they both dreamed, the cupbearer and the baker of the king of Egypt, who were confined in the prison, each his own dream. So the cupbearer and the baker have this dream. I'm gonna skip through a little bit, and they want the interpretation of the dream. They said to him, "We have had dreams, and there is no one to interpret." And Joseph said to them, "Do not interpretations belong to God? Please tell them to me." In other words, the understanding of your dreams will not come from me, but it will come from God. So he interprets the dreams for the cupbearer and says, "You'll return to your position and gain favor again." And the baker will not. Is basically the interpretation of the dream. He'll instead be put to death. And then it happens after the baker and the cupbearer were released that in fact happened. The cupbearer was put back to his position, found favor, and the baker was put to death. But here, okay, but he hanged the chief baker as Joseph had interpreted to them. Yet the chief cupbearer did not remember Joseph, but forgot him. So in other words, the time was not yet for Joseph to be freed and to gain favor. Probably because if he would have just ended up back under another master of a house and wound up in the same position he was under Potiphar. So again, if the cupbearer had remembered Joseph too soon, he probably would have been put in a lower position. But instead, he forgot about Joseph. I don't think that was by accident. After 2 whole years, that's a long time, Pharaoh dreamed that he was standing by the Nile. So Joseph's been in prison this whole time, favor, uh, with favor with the captain of the prison. So Pharaoh has this dream. He has two dreams, actually. Uh, so after he has this dream, he can't find anybody who could interpret them. Then the chief cupbearer said to Pharaoh, "I remember my offenses today." So there we go. The time has now come. It is according to God's plan that right now is the time for you to remember your offenses and to tell Pharaoh about Joseph, because this is the proper time, not earlier, right when you were released, which is what normally would have happened. 2 years later is the time. When Pharaoh was angry with his servants and put me and the chief baker in custody in the house of the captain of the guard. We dreamed on the same night, he and I, each having a dream with its own interpretation. A young Hebrew was there with us, a servant of the captain of the guard. We told him, he interpreted our dreams to us, giving an interpretation to each man according to his dream. And as he interpreted to us, so it came about. I was restored to my office, and the baker was hanged. Then Pharaoh sent and called Joseph, and they quickly brought him out of the pit. And when he had shaved himself and changed his clothes, he came in before Pharaoh. And Pharaoh said to Joseph, had a dream, and there is no one who can interpret it. I have heard it said of you that when you hear a dream, you can interpret it. Joseph answered Pharaoh, it is not in me. God will give Pharaoh a favorable answer. Amen. Then Pharaoh said to Joseph, behold, in my dream I was standing on the bank. So he gives him the two dreams that he had with the 7 cows and the 7 ears, or the 14 cows and 14 ears. Then Joseph said to Pharaoh, the dreams of Pharaoh are one. In other words, one and the same. They represent the same thing. God has revealed to Pharaoh what he is about to do. The 7 good cows are 7 years, and 7 good ears are 7 years. The dreams are one. The 7 lean, ugly cows that come up after the 7 years, and the 7 empty ears are 7 years of famine. It is as I told Pharaoh. God has shown to Pharaoh what he is about to do. That's interesting. God has shown Pharaoh what he is about to do. Look at that. He's telling Pharaoh, the highest ruler in the land, the king of Egypt, that the God of heaven is telling you what you are about to do. And yet you are going to freely do it of your own accord. That is compatibilism right there. There will come 7 years of great plenty throughout all the land of Egypt, but after them will arise 7 years of famine, and all the plenty will be forgotten in the land of Egypt. The famine will consume all the land. The plenty will be unknown in the land by reason of the famine, for it will be very severe. The doubling of Pharaoh's dream means that the thing is fixed by God. It is fixed. Okay. And God will shortly bring it about. So this is going to be God's doing. Now, therefore, let Pharaoh select a discerning and wise man and set him over the land of Egypt. Let Pharaoh proceed to appoint overseers. So he's telling him what the Lord is telling him he's going to do before he's going to do it. And then he tells him to gather the food and all this kind of stuff. This proposal pleased Pharaoh and all his servants. And Pharaoh said to his servants, can we find a man like this in whom is the Spirit of God? So the Spirit of God needs to reside in this man. Then Pharaoh said to Joseph, since God has shown you all this, there is none so discerning and wise as you are. You shall be over my house, and all my people shall order themselves as you command. Only as regards the throne will I be greater than you. See, and Pharaoh said to Joseph, see, I have set you over all the land of Egypt. Then Pharaoh took his signet ring from his hand and put it on Joseph's hand, and clothed him in garments of fine linen and put a gold chain about his neck. He made him ride in his second chariot, and they called out before him, bow the knee. Thus he set him over the land of Egypt. Moreover, Pharaoh said to Joseph, I am Pharaoh, and without your consent, no one shall lift up a hand or foot in all the land of Egypt. And Pharaoh called Joseph's name Zaphanath Paneah, and he gave him in marriage Asenath, the daughter of Potiphera, priest of On. So Joseph went out over the land of Egypt. So there is the plan of God that worked out in time with free moral agents and creatures doing exactly how his plan had preordained, predestined, determined, whatever term you want to use, to occur. I don't think there would be any variance in this plan. Joseph was 30 years old when he entered the service of Pharaoh, king of Egypt. So it tells you how old he is. So I don't think I need to go through all this. Talks about so the famine spreading over. And he did exactly what he said he was going to do. So and all of this is setting up so the dreams that were given to Joseph could be fulfilled. Because look here, Joseph's brothers go to Egypt, and why do they go to Egypt? Because of the the famine, because the famine is in their area as well. It's a long back and forth. I'm not going to read all of it. They just came there because they heard that there's grain for sale in Egypt, which is what everybody else in the surrounding area did as well too. They went to Egypt because Joseph had stored up and done what the Lord commanded. Thus the sons of Israel came to buy among the others who came, for the famine was in the land of Canaan. Now Joseph was governor of the land. And Joseph's brothers came and bowed themselves before him with their faces to the ground. There we go, fulfilling of the dream, the perfect infallible dream. And then he goes through. He recognizes them, and you know all that. And he calls them spies, and it's almost like he's messing with them a little bit, getting in his feelings, his emotions and all that. Rightfully so. Notice what they say here. We, your servants, are 12 brothers, the sons of one man in the land of Canaan. And behold, the youngest is this day with our father, and one is no more, which is the one who they're talking to. But Joseph said to them, it is as I said to you, you are spies. So he puts them to the test, and he purposely makes them seem like they are spies. And I don't think I'm going to read through all this. Then Reuben said to his father, kill my two sons if I do not bring him back. Oh, okay, yeah. So Joseph wanted his youngest to be brought back. He wanted him to be brought back safe, and if not, do this and that. So Judah said to him, the man solemnly warned us, saying, you shall not see my face unless your brother is with you. So the brother has to be with them, Benjamin. And right now Joseph has Benjamin, I believe, in custody, and he took him into his house, or I forget where exactly. But he had placed some coins or some silver or something in Benjamin's bag to accuse him of stealing. And they want to get him back and everything. And this is all. What this all is to bring Jacob and his mother back to the land of Egypt, so they will also bow down to him. That's what all this is about right here. You can read it on your own, but it is all of this is to fulfill the plan of God. We're going to see that it was exactly that, the plan of God. And the plan of God is infallible and is perfect. You can even say it's determined or predestined or whatever. I have heard people say that does not mean all things are predestined. And that is very true. But what this is showing, I think, is that God can predestine and determine things in such a way that man's free will is still intact. They still function as they desire and want to, within reason, within human reason, obviously. I'm sure there's more that I'm missing, but I do recommend reading all of this on your own. Just go through the whole story. You can get the full picture in your head. You can see what I'm saying is true. This is still him and his brothers going back and forth. Oh yeah, and then they went back to their father without him, I believe, without Benjamin. If you take this one also from me, and harm happens to him, you will bring down my gray hairs in evil to Sheol. He's saying, don't do it. Then Joseph could not control himself before all those who stood by him. He cried, "Make everyone go out from me." So no one stayed with him when Joseph made himself known to his brothers. And he wept aloud, so the Egyptians and Pharaoh heard it. And Joseph said to his brothers, "I am Joseph. Is my father still alive?" His brothers could not answer him, for they were dismayed at his presence. So Joseph said to his brothers, "Come near to me, please." And they came near, and he said, "I am your brother Joseph, whom you sold into Egypt. Now do not be distressed." Notice, "Now do not be distressed or angry with yourselves because you sold me," which they kind of should be, right? Because it was a very evil and wicked thing to do. But, but, he's going to tell them why they should not ultimately be angry or distressed with themselves. "For God sent me before you to preserve life." The evil, the wickedness of the brothers, which should rightfully distress and anger them, now is seen in a different light by them. Now they see that God sent me, Joseph, before you to preserve life. For the famine has been in the land these 2 years, and there are yet 5 years in which there will be neither plowing nor harvest. And God sent me before you. Notice, and God sent me before you to preserve for you a remnant on earth. So, in other words, God, in his perfect knowledge, his perfect plan, already knew that there was a famine that was coming. That it would be so severe that if this did not happen, Israel as a whole would have vanished and would have passed away and died, and Israel would have been no more. That is why we leave it up to God, ultimately. That is why it is according to God's plan and not ultimately up to our wills. We have our wills, we do what we desire, but ultimately it comes about how God desires it and wants it to come about. And God sent me before you to preserve for you a remnant on earth and to keep alive for you many survivors. Because remember his promise with Abraham, right? That is a promise that he was going to fulfill. So it was not you who sent me here. So it was not them who sent him to Egypt, but it was God. He has made me a father to Pharaoh and lord of all his house, which is Egypt, and ruler over all, well, that might be his personal house, actually, and ruler over all the land of Egypt. Hurry and go up to my father and say to him, Thus says your son Joseph, God has made me Lord of all Egypt. Come down to me, do not tarry. You shall dwell in the land of Goshen, and you shall be near me. And remember, Israelites, when they're in slavery, where are they at? They're in Goshen. You and your children, your children's children, and your flocks, your herds, all that you have, there I will provide for you. For there are yet 5 years of famine to come, so that you and your household and all that you have do not come to poverty. We're seeing the reason why God did what he did, why he planned what he did, why he used evil for good. And now your eyes see, and the eyes of my brother Benjamin see, that it is my mouth that speaks to you. You must tell my father of all my honor in Egypt and of all that you have seen. Hurry and bring my father down here. Then he fell upon his brother Benjamin's neck and wept. And Benjamin wept on his neck, and he kissed all his brothers and wept upon them. After that, his brothers talked with him. When the report was heard in Pharaoh's house, Joseph's brothers have come. It pleased Pharaoh and his servants. And Pharaoh said to Joseph, Say to your brothers, do this, load your beasts and go back to the land of Canaan, and take your father and your household, and come to me, and I will give you the best of the land of Egypt, and you shall eat the fat of the land. And Joseph and you, Joseph, are commanded to say, do this, take wagons from the land of Egypt for your little ones and for your wives, and bring your father and come. Have no concern for your goods, for the best of all the land of Egypt is yours. And tells them about they in fact do that. They go back and get this father. Israel said, it is enough. Joseph, my son, is still alive. I will go and see him before I die. So Israel took his journey with all that he had and came to Beersheba and offered sacrifices to the God of his father Isaac. God spoke to Israel in visions of the night and said, Jacob, Jacob. And he said, here I am. Then he said, I am God, the God of your father. Do not be afraid to go down to Egypt, for there I will make you into a great nation. I myself will go down with you to Egypt, and I will also bring you up again. See, I myself will go down to you. Whenever you read through all these, you read all the time about how God says he himself does this and does that. He himself causes calamities. He himself causes restoration, all these kind of things. If we just take those at face value, then very much so God decrees, ordains, predestines, preplans, foreknows, not foreknows, decrees, predestines, plans a lot of things ahead of time. I'll say that much. Foreknows perfectly, infallibly, all things. So it talks about the sons, lists the genealogies. I'm not going to go over any of that stuff. Genealogies of all the people who were going down to Egypt. But Jacob and Joseph reunited. This is all I'm going to go through here. It talks about there's food there, and people were coming to Egypt, and basically everybody gave everything away, and Egypt controlled everything, more or less. Like even the people said, "We will sell ourselves, and we will be servants to Pharaoh." That's how bad the famine was. Give your livestock, Joseph answered, and I will give you food in exchange for your livestock if your money is gone. And they brought their livestock to Joseph. Joseph gave them food in exchange for their horses. He supplied them with food in exchange for all their livestock that year. They came to him the following year and said, we will not hide from my lord that our money is all spent. The herds of livestock are my lord's. There is nothing left in the sight of my lord but our bodies and our land. Why should we die before your eyes, both we and our land? Buy us and our land for food, and we with our land will be servants to Pharaoh, and give us seed that we may live and not die, and that the land may not be desolate. So there we go. What I was just talking about. He buys basically all the people in the land, and as for the people, he made servants of them from one end of Egypt. Okay, so Joseph bought all the land of Egypt for Pharaoh, for all the Egyptians sold their fields because the famine was severe on the land. The land became Pharaoh's. Only the land of the priest he did not buy, for the priests had a fixed allowance from Pharaoh and lived on the allowance that Pharaoh gave them. Therefore, they did not sell their land. So Joseph's been making some sweet deals, and the Pharaoh owns everything. So the point of reading all of this, the reason I want to bring this up is obviously I think it proves compatibilism, biblical compatibilism. But when like I said, I may not completely agree with the philosophical compatibilism. I'm not concerned with that so much, but in this instance here, and it's super easy for us to say, right, is to say, well, for those people that was fine, as if they were less human or something like that, if they had less of a will than us, or their will, it was okay for God to do that with their wills, and to do everything that he did there. That was fine. But we're talking about us now. It's different. It's easy to say that, but I think this right here shows that in fact God can decree, plan, purpose, predestine whatever he desires in the end. And if he does, why would any of us complain about it? Because the ultimate good will come out of it. That ultimately is what this is about right here. The ultimate good comes about whenever God plans, predestines, determines, whatever term you want to use. That is why the Calvinists will quote, what is it, verse 20, because they can't go through all this text every time they talk about this, but that is why this says this here. When Joseph's brothers saw that their father was dead, they said, "It may be that Joseph will hate us and pay us back for all the evil." Even after all this time, look at them, they're still so guilt-ridden because of what they did, that they're still paranoid that Joseph may hate us and pay us back for all the evil that we did to him. Because look at it, they did evil to him. So they sent a message to Joseph saying, "Your father gave this command before he died. Say to Joseph, please forgive the transgression of your brothers and their sins, because they did evil to you. And now, please forgive the transgression of the servants of the God of your father." Joseph wept when they spoke to him. His brothers also came and fell down before him and said, "Behold, we are your servants." But Joseph said to them, "Do not fear, for am I in the place of God?" My chair. There we go. Am I in the place of God? As for you, no. Do not fear, for am I in the place of God? Talking about, paying back evil for what they did to him. In other words, no, I am not God. As for you, you meant evil against me. In fact, they did. But God meant it for good, to bring it about that many people should be kept alive as they are today. So do not fear. I will provide for you and your little ones. Thus he comforted them and spoke kindly to them. So let's look at this real quick before I end the stream. But as for you, you thought or meant this for evil, but God thought or meant it for good. Notice it's the same exact word, 2803. Now, what did we see with Joseph's brothers? They planned ahead of time. They schemed and they planned ahead of time. That's what this means, is that they meant, or they planned this for evil. The word is kashab, to think, to plan, to esteem, to calculate, invent, make a judgment, imagine, count. To think, account, to plan, devise, mean, to charge, impute, reckon, esteem, value, so on and so forth. To plan, to devise, to think, to do, to count, to reckon, to be considered. So in other words, they planned this ahead of time to commit this evil. And yet, God planned all of this ahead of time for good. You can't say on the one hand that these brothers allowed this, excuse me, you can't say these brothers meant this and planned this ahead of time to do evil, but God merely allowed it. It's the exact same word. It means the exact same thing, except for God, it's in the perfect sense. It's not in a human flawed sense. They both planned. One plan was greater, and one plan used, not just simply allowed, but used part of his plan, the evil of men, to bring about good. That's what this text says. And from the context, from chapter 37 to now, that is very clear. That is very clear to me. So I think that lays out pretty well. I don't know if anybody's listening, but I mean, like I said, I'm not concerned at all about philosophical positions. I really don't have any desire for that. It's irrelevant to me. What is relevant is what the Word of God says, and all I desire is to conform to that. Beyond that, I don't mind speculating now and then, entertaining different ideas. But at the end of the day, it's just going to be that to me. It's not going to be anything more. It might be uh, fun or entertaining, because like in the Middle Ages, they would do that with stuff like with angels. Think about, well, how many angels could do this, and what could they do in this situation? That's all fun for us God fearing individuals. But doctrinally speaking, at the end of the day, I want what's in this text, nothing more. What we saw in this text, if you're listening, if you were able to bear everything that I said, uh, quite in fact, this would be a proof of a type of biblical compatibilism where God plans something and man plans something, but God's plan is greater than man's plan, or predestined or determined, or whatever term you want to use. I don't really care personally. But the text here is, like I showed, is kashab, I think. And it's the planning, right? It uses it for both the men, the brothers, and for God. They both kashabbed. It's just one kashab, which is God's, is greater and perfect and is before time. And then the brothers' kashab was in time, was flawed, and it was evil. So, will I go over more? I'm not going to go over more tonight, but other examples of this. And like I said, this may not be in every situation. I don't think I would anymore hold to God determining to create every single thing. I don't think. I think that's stretching what the scriptures say a little more than what like an active decree like this. But God definitely does perfectly foreknow everything infallibly. I would say that much. But beyond that, I mean, let God be true and let every man be a liar ultimately. Uh, Grace and peace to you, Chris, man. It's good to see you. It's been a few days since I've talked to you. I hope you and your family are doing well. Hope your job is good. And also, I hope your running for office does well. Maybe you don't want to actually win, but because that would be pretty darn stressful, man. I would, if you won, man, my hat would go off to you because that would stress me out. Man, it was. I'm not good at being a politician. Those people in office just grind my gears every day. I swear. But so if you end up winning, man, that's gonna be awesome. It's gonna be awesome. We need more individuals like you in office for sure, no doubt. My state has some. Man, my county was horrible with voting this last time. We had. Oh, it was horrible. It was horrible. But a lot of Californians have moved into my county, since the convid started. They're flooding into here. We have like tons more people here, and a lot of them are Californians. A lot of Californians, some Washington, but a lot of California license plate. But yeah, all right. I think I'm going to end this stream. So I want to thank everybody for listening who did listen. I know your time is valuable and important to you, so I appreciate that you took some of your time out of your day to listen to this stream. Grace and peace to everybody. God bless.